Hello, thank you for joining us for our training video today on narratives and the sign-off work list. This is part of our EHR efficiencies series and presented today by me, Nathan Taylor, COT, EHR specialist. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn about narratives. What exactly is a narrative? A narrative is a text summary of your entire EHR visit. It gives you a quick and easy access to previous visit data or to today's visit data. It can be viewed easily prior to entering the exam room to make sure that you are familiarized with the patient's reason for visit. The narrative can be saved as a file and sent electronically or put on a disk or flash drive when a patient asks for their copies of their records. It's published to the patient portal for easy electronic access for patients to see their records and for meaningful use compliance. So where do I find the narrative in Management Plus? Different copies of the narrative can be found in many places. It depends on where you are and what exactly you're looking for. We can find them in the EHR tab from the patient screen. We can find them inside of the EHR visit from the window menu. Historical narratives are found under the Narratives menu inside of the EHR, and we can even find a copy of the narrative from the sign-off work list, which we'll learn about today as well. Okay, so here we're going to learn about a viewable narrative versus a printable narrative. So we're going to start on the home screen of Management Plus, and we're going to select a patient. So we'll click on our patient's icon and select our most recent patient, who is Carl Aaron. Now this will pull up the patient's demographics screen and all of the EHR visits. Now we can select any of these EHR visits that we want and right-click. Right-clicking will bring up another menu which will show us our different narrative options from this section. So we can either select the view narrative or print narrative. If we select the view narrative, it will pull up our HTML version, which is a viewable version of the narrative that can be easily modified in size to fit wherever you'd like on your screen, or it can be maximized to fill the whole screen to show as much data as possible. Now the other type, if we close this here, is the printable narrative. So once again we right click, and this time we're going to select print narrative. Now this one will give us a print preview option. We click on OK and it will show us the print view, and it'll show exactly how many pages this narrative is going to take. So if we click on the arrows, we can navigate through the different pages of our narrative. So from the patient's demographics screen and their EHR visit tabs, we see that there's two options, the view option and the print option. Okay, so now we're going to go to the inside of our EHR visit. We've got a new visit open for a patient, and once again we have different options for which type of narrative we want to view. Here we're going to see today's narrative versus historical narratives for the patient. So from inside the EHR visit, up in our top options, we're going to click on Window, and underneath Window we'll see Narrative. When we click on narrative, once again it's going to launch an HTML version of the narrative. Now this is today's narrative, and you can tell that for sure because it's going to match your date of service. So we see up in the top of the window here, today's narrative 5/14 matches our date of service 5/14. Once again, this window can be modified in size. We can make it smaller, we can make it larger, we can make it windowed mode. Whichever size we want it to show on our screen, and all the data will modify based on which size you make the window so that it's all viewable. We can move it over to the side here if we want to see today's while we're doing the exam. Now the other way is moving over in our top menu options to where it says narratives. Now this will pull up a list of all available historical narratives for that patient. So we can pick whichever visit we want for that narrative to show, and it will pop up on the side here. Now once again, we can see that this is a historical narrative because the date of the visit shows up at the top of the window here. This one is now March 25th, whereas the date of service is May 14th. So once again, this window can be modified, whichever size that we want, but we can also open multiples of these types of narratives, of these historical narratives at the same time, for easy viewing of lots of the patient's historical data. So we can put these side by side, and once again we'll see that based on the date that's at the top of the window is the narrative that you're looking at. This one is March 25th, and this one is January 28th. Now the benefit of being able to open multiple narratives at the same time is you can scroll through their data. Now what you see here is me actually pulling these narratives to a second monitor, which is also very convenient if you have dual monitor in your exam lanes. Once again, these can be resized, and each narrative window can be resized to fit as many as you would like on one screen at the same time. Okay, now from our file menu there's going to be a couple of different options as far as printing the narrative from inside of the EHR visit. We can either print the full narrative or we can print a select narrative, which will be just a selection of different pages instead of the narrative in full. So from our file menu, we're going to arrow up to the top, file, and you'll see our two different narrative options here, either print full narrative or print select narrative. So the option we're going to pick first is print full narrative. Now this will bring us once again to our preview, and this shows us the same type of narrative that we saw from the patient's demographics screen. It's the printable version that will show you exactly how many pages the narrative is going to be, and you can scroll through each page to preview them before you actually print it. Now we can close this, go back to our file menu, and the other one we're going to see here is the select narrative. So if we didn't want to print the full 3 or 4 page narrative, we can select which pages of narrative we specifically want to print. So for this one, if we wanted to just see the workup narrative, we can select workup and click OK, and it will open the narrative, which used to be 3 pages, now just to 1 page of only narrative that was related to that workup page. This makes it very convenient if you didn't want to see the whole narrative or if the patient just asked specifically for one section. So once again, our options from the file menu as far as printing the narrative goes are printing the full narrative or printing a selected narrative. Okay, so once we have our narrative and we want to not only be able to print it but be able to save it as a file. Now there's very convenient reasons that you may want to save the narrative as a file, whether or not you wanted to give it to the patient on a flash drive or a disk, or if you wanted to send that file electronically through a secure email to another physician. So we go back to the patient's demographics page, find the visit of the narrative that we want to save, and once again right click. Now we'll see our options here again, view narrative or print narrative, and we're going to go ahead and choose the one that says print narrative. Now when our options open here, instead of previewing the narrative to print it, we're going to select the file option. So we have a printer option, a preview option, and a file option. So we're going to pick the file option, and then we're going to pick which file type we want to save this as. Most commonly, these are saved as PDFs, and then they can be opened in any PDF viewing software that you have on your system. So let's go ahead and pick Adobe Acrobat PDF. And then what we need to do is click on the little disk to actually save it. And we're going to go ahead and name our file here So we'll call it Carl Aaron narrative because that's our patient. Looks like we've saved one for Mr. Aaron before. And we have to decide exactly where this file is going to save. So I've told it just to save right on my desktop here for easy access. So go ahead and click Save and click OK, and it will save that file to your desktop. Now I can open up a Windows Explorer here and go to my desktop options, and I'll be able to see that that narrative was saved and open it in a PDF viewer here. So once again, you have options as far as the narrative's concerned. We don't just have to print it, but we can save that narrative as a file to be used in any way that you would like. Okay, so now we're done with our visits. We're going to learn about the sign-off work list. So what is the sign-off work list? Basically, it's a list of your EHR visits that have been saved that have not been finalized. The sign-off work list makes finalizing multiple records at a time very easy. The sign-off work list can help remind you which records you may still have unfinished work to be done on. It's permission-based, so not all of your staff has access. And from the sign-off work list, you can actually review the patient's EHR visit, or you can review the narrative directly from the sign-off work list. Okay, so where do we find the sign-off work list? We're going to start on our Management Plus home screen, and we're going to select from our top in our File menu. We're going to go to File, and then scroll down to Electronic Health Record, and then the fifth option down is our sign-off work list. Now this will pull up another window that is called the EHR sign-off work list. This window is modifiable. You can make it larger, you can make it smaller. It's also sortable by columns, so we can sort by patient, by physician, or by date of service. So we can see all of the EHR visits either for that patient or for that physician that have not been finalized. So our options from the list are very convenient. We can either double click on a record that will actually open that EHR visit that's not finalized yet, in case we needed to make any other additions. Or we can right click and see what our other options are. So if we right click on that patient's name, we can either open the patient's record, we can open the patient's demographics page, or we can review or print the narrative. And obviously we can finalize from here as well. So let's go ahead and pick the top one, which is open the patient. That'll bring us to the patient's demographics page where we can see all of their EHR visits and review their demographics. Now if we pick review record, then that will open this specific EHR visit that has not been finalized yet, so we can make any additional edits if needs be. So once we make our edits, we can either save or not save or finalize from inside of the EHR visit. Now the other way here is our double click method, where if we double click that patient's name, it will open to that specific record. And we didn't make any changes, so we'll say no here. And then the other way that we can see our narratives is by selecting either to view the narrative, which will pull up our HTML version here, or selecting print narrative, which will bring up our print view that we've seen before and show us which specific pages here are ready to be printed. Now if we don't need to do any more review for this patient, we're ready to finalize, all we have to do is right click and finalize that record. Now once it's finalized, it will remove it from our list here. Now you might say, well, it's going to be very time consuming to have to right click and finalize each of these visits from here, and in order to make that as easy as possible, you can actually select multiple records at the same time. So by either using a shift select or a control select, you'll be able to finalize multiple records at the same time. So if we go ahead and hold our control and select one patient, or shift and select one patient and then select another, it will allow us to finalize multiple records very easily at the same time. We can do them in big chunks, or we can pick individual records just like this for that specific doctor or that specific patient and finalize all those at the same time. Now once these are finalized from the work list, they will disappear. Only the ones that still need to be finalized will show up in your sign-off work list. Now once again, the sign-off work list is very convenient because if you know that there's records that you still need to work on, you can work on them from here instead of trying to keep track of your schedules. And if you haven't been finalizing, we're going to give you some good reasons that you should finalize records in the next slide here. So why should I finalize my EHR records? Well, number one, it secures the record from any additional unwanted editing. Only staff with permission may unlock a record for editing. So if you are finished with that specific record and you don't want any other additional edits to be made, finalizing is a great way to secure that record. So finalizing also creates an audit trail. It requires you to enter a reason for editing the EHR record after finalizing if you do want to edit it. So once again, it can help you keep track of EHR records that are still in need of work to be done, and some insurance payers even require a finalized or sign-off record in case of an insurance audit. So very good reasons to finalize your records, and typically it's a very good practice to be able to utilize that sort of function inside of your EHR. So thanks for participating in our video today. If you have any specific questions regarding the narrative or the sign-off work list, you can contact our EHR support team at ehrsupport@managementplus.com or at 1-800-695-6994 option 1 and option 1. Thanks again for attending our video.